Chapter 8 of Book One of Physics by Aristotle, translated by Thomas Taylor. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 8. We therefore shall speak as follows. First, discussing the whole of generation, for it is conformable to nature, having first considered such things as are common, to contemplate afterwards the peculiarities of any individual. For we say that one thing is generated from another, and a different thing from a different thing, when we speak either of things simple, or of such as are composite. My meaning is this: a man may become a musician. Something also which is not musical may become a musician, or a man who is not a musician may become a musical man. That which is simply generated, therefore, I call man, and that which is not musical. The simple which is generated I call that which is musical. But the composite, of which there is a generation, and which is generated, I consider as subsisting when we say that a man who is not a musician becomes a musician. But of these, the one is not only said to have become this particular thing, but also to have been generated from this particular thing, as for instance a musician from that which is not a musician. But the other is not predicated of all things, for a musician is not generated from a man, but a man becomes a musician. Of things, however, which are generated, as we say that things simple are generated, one thing, when in generation, or becoming to be, remains, but the other does not remain, for man remains, and is in becoming a musician. But that which is not musical, and that which is void of music, neither simply nor in a composite manner remains. But these things being defined from everything which is generated, this may be concluded by any one who directs his attention to it, that it is necessary, as we have said, there should always be something which is the subject of generation. And this, though it is one in number, yet is not one in form. For by one in form I mean the same thing as one in definition. For the essence of man, and of that which is void of music, are not the same. And the one indeed remains, but the other does not remain. That which is not opposed remains, for man remains, but that which is musical and that which is void of music do not remain. Nor does that which is composed from both remain, as for instance an unmusical man. But that something should be generated from something, and that something should not become this particular thing, each of these is rather predicated of things which do not remain. As for instance, that which is musical is said to be generated from that which is void of music, but not from man. Nevertheless, this is sometimes similarly asserted of things which remain. For we say that a statue is generated from brass, and not that the brass is generated a statue. Of that, however, which is opposed, and does not remain, the predication is made in both ways, viz., this particular thing is said to be generated from that, and that particular thing is said to be generated this. A musician also is generated from that which is void of music, and he who is void of music becomes a musician. Hence also the like takes place in the composite, for from an unmusical man, a man void of music is said to have become a musician. Since, however, the term generation is multifariously predicated, and some things are said not to be generated simply, but to be generated this particular thing, but simply to be generated is the property of essences only. This being the case, in other things it is evident that there must necessarily be something which is the subject of generation. For quantity and quality, that which is a relative, when and where, become the subjects of a certain thing, because essence alone is predicated of no other subject, but all other things are predicated of essence. But that essences and such other things as have a simple subsistence are generated from a certain subject will become evident to him who considers this affair. For there is always something which is placed under these, from which the thing produced is generated, as for instance plants and animals from seed. But things which are simply generated are generated partly by a mutation of figure, as a statue from brass, and partly by addition, as things which are increased. Some too are generated by ablation, as mercury from a stone, but others by composition, as a house. Others again are generated by a change in quality, as things which are varied according to their matter. But it is evident that all such particulars as are thus generated are generated from subjects, so that from what has been said it is manifest that everything generated is always a composite, and there is something indeed which is generated, but there is also something which this thing becomes. And this which is generated is twofold, for it is either the subject or the opposite. I mean that what is void of music is opposed, but that man is the subject. I also call the privation of figure, form, or order that which is opposed, but the brass, the stone, or the gold the subject. It is evident, therefore, if those things are the causes and principles of things subsisting from nature, from which primarily they derive their being, and are generated not from accident, but what each is said to be according to essence, it is evident, if this be the case, that everything is generated from subject and form. For a musical man is composed, after a certain manner, from man and musician. For you dissolve reasons, definitions, into the reasons of them. It is evident, therefore, that things generated are generated from these. The subject, however, is one in number, but two in species. For man and gold, and in short, matter, are numerable. For it is more this particular thing, and that which is generated is not generated from it according to accident. But privation and contrariety are accidents. Form, however, is one principle, as for instance, order, or music, or some one of other things which are thus predicated. Hence the principles may be said to be two, and they may also be said to be three. They are also partly contraries, as if some one should speak of that which is musical, and that which is void of music, or of the hot and the cold, or the harmonized and that which is deprived of harmony. They are likewise partly not contraries, for it is impossible for contraries to be passive to each other. This, however, is solved because the subject is different, for this is not contrary, so that principles, after a manner, are neither more than contraries, but two, as I may say, in number. Nor again are they entirely two, because their essence is different, but three. For the essence of man is different from the essence of that which is void of music, and also the essence of that which is void of figure is different from that of brass. What the number, therefore, is of the principles of natural things, which are conversant with generation, and after what manner they are so many, has been declared. It is also evident that it is necessary something should subsist as a subject to contraries, and that the contraries should be two, but that after a certain manner this is not necessary. For the other of the contraries will be sufficient, by its absence and presence, to the production of change. But the subject nature may be scientifically known according to analogy. For as is the brass to the statue, or the wood to the bed, or matter and that which is deprived of form to anything else which possesses form, before it receives form, so is this subject nature to essence, to this particular individual thing, and to being. This, therefore, is one principle, though it is not one, nor being in such a manner as this particular individual thing. Another principle is form, and further still, the contrary to this, privation. But with respect to these, how they are two, and how they are more than two, has been declared above. In the first place, therefore, it has been said that principles are contraries only, and in the next place, that it is necessary something else should be admitted as a subject, and that there should be three principles. But from what has been now said, it is evident what the difference of the contraries is, how the principles are related to each other, and what is their subject. It is not, however, yet manifest whether form or the subject is the essence of a thing, but that the principles are three, and how they are three, and what the mode is of their subsistence is evident. Hence, how many principles there are, and what they are, may be from these things surveyed. Chapter 9. But that the doubt of the ancients can only be thus solved, we shall in the next place show. For the first philosophers, in investigating the truth and nature of things, wandered, as if led by ignorance, into a certain other path. Hence they say that no being is either generated or corrupted, because it is necessary that what is generated should be generated either from being or non-being. But both these are impossible, for neither can being be generated, since it already is, and from nothing nothing can be generated, because it is necessary that something should exist as a subject. And thus increasing that which consequently happened, they said that there were not many things, but that being itself alone had a subsistence. They therefore entertained this opinion for the above-mentioned reasons. We, however, say that for a thing to be generated from being or non-being, or for non-being or being to do or suffer anything, or for this particular individual thing to become anything whatever, in one way does not in any respect differ from asserting that a physician does or suffers anything, or that anything is or is generated from a physician. So that, since this is predicated in a twofold respect, it is evident that this will also be the case with the assertion that from being, being will either be an agent or patient. A physician, therefore, builds, not so far as he is a physician, but so far as he is a builder, and he becomes white, not so far as he is a physician, but so far as he is black. But he heals, and becomes deprived of medical skill, so far as he is a physician. Since, however, we say with the greatest propriety that a physician does or suffers anything, or is generated from a physician, when he suffers or does these things, so far as he is a physician, it is also evident that to assert a thing is generated from non-being signifies this, so far as it is non-being, which indeed the ancient philosophers, not distinguishing, deviated from the right path, and through this ignorance added so much to their want of knowledge as to fancy that nothing else was generated or had a being, but they subverted all generation. We ourselves, indeed, say that nothing is simply generated from non-being, but that at the same time it may be generated from non-being, as it were, according to accident. For a thing may be generated from privation, which is non-being per se, since it is not inherent in the thing which is generated. But this is admirable, and it seems impossible that anything should be thus generated from non-being. In like manner, we say that neither is anything generated from being, nor is being generated except according to accident. We likewise assert that this takes place after the same manner as if animal should be generated from animal, and a certain animal from a certain animal, as for instance a dog from a horse. For the dog would be generated not only from a certain animal, but also from animal, though not so far as it is animal, because it is this already. But if it should come to pass that anything should be generated an animal not from accident, it will not be from animal. And if anything is generated being, it will not be generated from being, nor from non-being. For we have observed that the expression from non-being signifies so far as it is non-being. We likewise do not subvert the assertion that everything is or is not. This, therefore, is one mode of solving the doubt. Another mode is this, that the same things may be predicated according to capacity and according to energy. This, however, in other treatises we have more accurately discussed, so that, as we have said, the doubts are solved, through which the ancients were compelled to subvert some of the above-mentioned particulars. For on this account they so much wandered from the way which leads to generation and corruption, and in short to mutation. Since this nature, if they had perceived it, would have dissolved all this their ignorance. Chapter 10. Certain other philosophers, indeed, have mentioned this nature, but not sufficiently. For, in the first place, they acknowledge that something may be simply generated from non-being, so far as they confess that Parmenides is right in what he asserts. In the next place, it appeared to them that if this nature is one in number, it is also only one in capacity. There is, however, in this case a great difference, for we say that matter and privation are different, and of these, matter indeed is non-being according to accident, but privation is non-being per se. Matter likewise is near, and is in a certain respect essence, but this is by no means the case with privation. Others again assert that the great and the small are similarly non-being, either both together, or each separate from the other, so that this mode of the triad entirely differs from that. For thus far they proceeded, so as to conclude that there must necessarily be a certain nature as a subject, and this they made to be one. For though a certain person introduces the duad, asserting that this subject nature is the great and the small, nevertheless he makes it to be the same, because he neglects the other principle, viz., privation. Matter, indeed, remaining, is a concause, together with form, of generated natures, having the relation of a mother; but the other nature, privation, which is a part of contrariety, may often seem to him who directs his dianoetic power to its noxious nature to have no subsistence whatever. For since there is something divine, good, and desirable, we say that there is one thing contrary to it, and another which is naturally adapted to desire and extend itself towards it. But from the assertions of some it happens that what is contrary desires the corruption of itself, though neither is it possible that form can desire itself, because it is not indignant of itself, nor that which is contrary to itself, for contraries are corruptive of each other. But this which desires is matter, just as the female desires the male, and the deformed the beautiful. The deformed, however, does not essentially desire the beautiful, nor the female the male, but the desire of both is according to accident. Matter, however, is partly corrupted and generated, and partly not. For so far as it is that in which it is essentially corrupted, since that which is corrupted, viz., privation, is in matter. But so far as it subsists according to capacity, it is not essentially generated and corrupted, but it is necessary that it should be incorruptible and unbegotten. For if it were generated, it is necessary that something which ranks as a first nature should subsist as the subject of it, from which, being inherent, it is generated. But this is its nature, so that it will be before it is generated. For I call matter the first subject of everything from which a thing is generated, when it is not accidentally inherent. And if anything is corrupted, it will ultimately arrive at this, so that matter will be corrupted before it is corrupted. Concerning the principle, however, which subsists according to form, whether it be one or many, and what it is, or what they are, it is the business of the first philosophy accurately to determine, so that it must be deferred till that time. We shall, however, speak in what will be hereafter demonstrated concerning natural and corruptible forms. That there are principles, therefore, and what they are, and how many in number, let it be thus determined by us. Let us, however, again speak from another beginning. End of chapter 10 and end of book 1. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.